It was a promotion that I didn't expect. I didn't plan for. I didn't even sort out because teaching is the thing that really I'm passionate about. And here's a lesson, here's a nugget. We think we want the next big thing and we're planning for the future. The truth is, the only job we have is the one that we're currently in. And the only job we should attempt to do is the one that we currently have. When we do the job that we currently have to the best of our ability, with excellence, when we do the job that we currently have, more than is expected of us, somebody notices, somebody sees it, and somebody would say, I want you to do this with me.
Tell us some factors that you believe that God may have used to promote you. Someone listening to this conversation might have a decision to make. It's a decision that is not necessarily a black and white, wrong or right decision, but they are trying to make a decision. What word of wisdom would you give to this person or someone who is struggling to make a decision? Hello and welcome to the Wise Leader Virtual Summit. I'm your host, Firm Faith Watson. Today, we are very privileged to have with us Dr. Christon Arthur, and he is going to be sharing his amazing testimony of how God has been working marvelously in his life. The title of his interview is The Blessing of Disappointments. If you have ever been disappointed as a leader, you want to stay tuned because Dr. Arthur is going to share with us some practical strategies that will help us to grow in this area. Dr. Arthur, thank you very much for taking the time to share with us today.
Dr. Watson, it's my pleasure to be here with you, and I'm honored to be part of this conversation this afternoon.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited about getting into this interview. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do?
Thank you very much. So I'm from the Caribbean island. It's a relatively small island called Grenada. And not very many persons have heard of or know where Grenada is located, but it's located in the Southern Caribbean. And when I say it's between Barbados and Trinidad, in that area, people say, oh, I know where that is. So it's that far south. A small island that is 25 miles long and 12 miles wide. So it's very tiny. Yeah, it's very tiny. And there's truth to this adage that great things come from small packages. So this tiny island has produced some wonderful and talented and tremendous people. And I'm proud to be a son of the islands, if you will. I currently work at Andrews University in Southwest Michigan. And for the last 7 years or so, I've been serving there as Provost. And nobody knows what a Provost does, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes.
I was about to say amen to that, because, and I look forward to you sharing the role of a provost in a moment. So the title of this interview, as I said before, is The Blessing of Disappointment. Why did you choose this title?
As leaders, disappointment, these are part of the trade, if you will. We are disappointed on so many occasions for so many reasons. And I go back to maybe 30 years ago. I was beginning my career. I was a high school teacher, and there was an opening for the high school principal. And everybody thought, that's your job. Of course, you'll be the high school principal. So I was part of that process, went through, interviewed, and felt very confident, maybe too confident that I would be the next principal of that high school. And as it turned out, I wasn't. And I was devastated. I was crushed. And I questioned God. What happened? I mean, I was certain that this was going to be my moment. And I spent a few days moping around, feeling bad about myself and wondering what's next. And it was as though everything ended. And Dr. Watson, about a month or so afterwards, I got a call. The call was from a non-governmental agency, Organization of American States. And they called to say, we've been looking at you and we have your name here. And we're calling now to offer you a scholarship, all tuition paid, to do some graduate studies because we're looking at you and we want to offer this to you. And it didn't take me very long to say, absolutely, yes, I want to go on to pursue my graduate studies. When I went home, talking to my wife, I said, had that principal's job be offered to me, I would have said, absolutely, yes, this is it, absolutely, yes. And would have gotten that call from this organization saying, we want you to do your graduate work. 1 month after, I would have said yes. There was no way I would have said yes to going to graduate school 1 month after being appointed principal. So I had to pass up on this opportunity to go to graduate school. Well, here's the trajectory of all of this. Went off to graduate school, and my career in higher education started after my graduation with a doctoral degree. And I wouldn't have been a university faculty. I wouldn't have been in university administration. I wouldn't have been a provost at Andrews University had I gotten the job I asked God for, to be a high school principal. So the disappointment of not being a high school principal has opened up so many more doors and caused me to have, I think, a much more impactful ministry in higher education, doing what I can to better the life of students, faculty, and all employees, only because I had a no for the job I wanted.
Powerful, amazing. Thanks for sharing that story. I'm glad I asked why you chose that title. And I think your story is a good segue to this next question. Psalm 75 verses 6 and 7 indicates that promotion cometh neither from the east, nor from the west, nor from the south, but God is the judge. He sets up one and puts down another. Could you share with us some pivotal moments in your career to help us understand how God has orchestrated your career?
In higher education, I started in higher education in 2001, many moons ago. And my career started at Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. And the truth is, this 20 plus years afterwards, I now serve as provost. But in higher education, the only job I really applied for was the job of being assistant professor. So in 2000, thereabout, I applied, sent out many applications, and we chose to go to Nashville at Tennessee State. Went through the process of being promoted to associate professor with tenure after 5 years. And then I was enjoying teaching, doing what I love best, being in the classroom. And then the dean of the College of Education one afternoon said to me, you know, I want you to be my associate dean. Go home and talk to your wife about it. So talk to my wife. What about me? I have to make that decision. He said, no, go talk to your wife about it. And conversations happened at home. And in the end, we said, yeah, okay, we'll accept this challenge of being associate dean. It was a promotion that I didn't expect. I didn't plan for. I didn't even sort out, because teaching is the thing that really I'm passionate about. And here's a lesson, here's a nugget. You know, we think we want the next big thing, and we're planning for the future. The truth is, the only job we have is the one that we're currently in. And the only job we should attempt to do is the one that we currently have. When we do the job that we currently have to the best of our ability, with excellence, when we do the job that we currently have, more than is expected of us, somebody notices, somebody sees it, and somebody would say, you know, I want you to do this with me. I want you to do that for me. And that was my stint into administration. And it continued. I was happily working at Tennessee State University. It was probably the place I needed to start my career. It really enhanced me professionally. I was engaged in the Nashville community doing what I think is impactful work. And then someone said to me, you know, there is a dean position at Andrews University. And I felt a desire to give back. I felt a desire to give back to my faith community, my faith tradition, and said, okay, put my name in. And in a few months, I transitioned from Tennessee State in Nashville, Tennessee, to Andrews University, which no one knew that name. No one, are you crazy? What are you doing? You're in Nashville, you're at Tennessee State. The president of Tennessee State called me and said, I heard you're leaving. Have you lost your mind? What are you doing? But there was this desire to give back to my faith community. And I came to Andrews in 2010 to be Dean of the Graduate School, Dean of Graduate Studies and Research. Back to this line, the only job you have is the one you're in. Do it the best possible. People will notice. After 2 years, the provost called me and said, I want you to be my associate provost. The only job you have is the one that you're in. Don't plan too far ahead. Do it to the best of your ability. And so I was graduate dean, associate provost from 2012 until 2016, when the then provost became president and said, I want you to be my provost. And it's all a matter of, it's God. God allows us to have the capacity to do what we do in amazing ways so that we flourish where we are. You know, it's the old adage, grow where you're planted, flourish where you are, and those who have the eyes to see will then pluck you out and plant you someplace else. And God orchestrated all of that. I applied for one job really to become assistant professor, and people noticed my work and asked me to join them in the work that they're doing.
Well, having listened to your answer, I have another question coming up. But before I ask you that question, I just want you to tell our audience, who is a provost?
And, you know, I joke all the time that because no one knows what a provost does or who a provost is, whatever I do, I can get away with it because they think that's a provost job, whether it is or not. So, you know, someone said to me, the root of the provost, that actual word, it goes back to medieval time and medieval prisons. The provost was the head of the prison, you know. I'm saying, what a word to use for higher education. What are we saying? But the provost is really the second in command at the university. The president is the chief executive officer, and the provost is second in command. The provost usually, and in my case, it happens as well, that I'm the chief academic officer as part of the provost portfolio. But the provost also takes care of the operations of the university, the day-to-day affairs of the university. Presidents tend to be outward looking. They meet with donors, they meet with alumni, they do fundraising, they get involved in government relations, so they're outward looking 90% of the time. And the provost who does the job well stays at home and take care of the academic and the operations of the university to make sure the university functions the way that it should be. And so the president wanders off, because the job usually is external. The provost stays at home and makes sure that home is cared for.
Yes, you are so correct. The provost bears a lot of the responsibility of the university.
Yes.
Yes. Thanks for that. That is so true.
And Dr. Watson, at some point in my career, I had hair and administrative duties, including the provost, taking care of the home front. The hair tends to dissipate as part. So as responsibilities increases, there's an inverse relationship. An increase of responsibility, a decrease in hairline.
Oh, well, it suits you well, so that's a good thing. Okay, so now, having listened to your journey and how God has been working amazingly in your life, and I see the trend that people tend to notice your work and then they call you to serve. So that takes me to the next question. And I know that it might be a little bit awkward for you to answer. However, I really believe, so I really want you to answer it. I really believe that your answer will help us on our journey. So again, I know it's hard. Tell us some factors that you believe that God may have used to promote you. For example, let me help you out here. What do people tend to appreciate about you, or have even said or noted about you?
You know, this is a difficult question for me. I would have preferred if you had asked my friend and colleague, for example, Dr. Andrea Luckstead, my former president, to speak on my behalf, because sometimes it is difficult to speak on your own behalf. And on this occasion, it's true. It's difficult to speak on my own behalf. I'd rather speak about other people. But, you know, she and I, we have talked about, you know, what she saw, what caused her after 2 years of being at Andrews to ask me to be her associate provost. And maybe surprising, humility, humility. And in the academic setting, humility looks like this: not wanting to be on the stage in the spotlight, but saying, these are the members of my team, and pushing them in the spotlight. And then standing back and saying, these are the team members that accomplish all of this. Give them a round of applause, right? Standing back, promoting others. You know, self-promotion is probably the most deadly vice there is. And as part of this Christian community, as part of this higher education community, leadership is more about putting others in the spotlight and not your own self. You build a stage for others to stand in the spotlight. Humility. Um, and I'll add one more, integrity, you know. Your integrity might be misunderstood for that you stand for something. It may come across as, why isn't he playing with the rest of us and going along with what we say is the right thing here to do? And to look into yourselves and say, because this rubs against my own value. This rubs against my own core value. I can't quite do this. Having the integrity to be true to yourself. And knowing that being true to yourself usually that comes with a cost. And being willing to pay the price for your own integrity. To say, yeah, that's the price I'm willing to pay. I'm willing to stand for this because I really can't do something differently. And I think persons in leadership want to have others around them when things go rocky, and things will go rocky. When things go rocky, they can stand and say, yeah, in this turbulent moment, I stand with you because I think we did the right thing, even if the right thing is causing us a lot of uh, pain and pushbacks. And, we will still stand because we thought we did the right thing. If people get the sense that every time there is a difficulty, you bail out, it speaks to the momentary gains over the values that you hold. And that's never a good thing to do, or a good place to find yourself. So I give you those two. We might talk about others as you ask more questions.
Okay. All right. Those were two excellent answers. Thanks for sharing those. And I look forward to hearing more as I go along. I'm intrigued because you mentioned Dr. Luxton. And
Yes.
you're right. If I were supposed to talk to her, she would have told me a lot more because she was the one who recommended you for this interview. So, Dr. Luxton, if you're watching this interview, thank you. So you mentioned that if people see you bailing out when difficulties arise, that say something that is not positive. I am going to develop on that comment in the next question because I believe that it's some lessons that you have learned on your leadership journey that could help you to make a statement like that. So with that in mind,
Yes.
I want to ask you this question. Could you share with us a few lessons or word of wisdom that have helped you on your leadership journey? And there are no limits to this question. It could even start from lessons that you learned from your childhood experience. So, yes.
That's beautiful because I'm going to go back to my childhood. I mentioned in the first question or so that I'm from an island, Grenada. It's a tiny island. It was a British colony. As a matter of fact, Britain was the last colonizing power. That's why English is the language of my country. But all of the European colonizers came to Grenada. The French, the Dutch, the Spanish, the English. They rotated around. They just changed around, right? We were like the bargaining chip, right? I need to make an agreement. What can you give me? I give you Grenada. Okay, I'll take Grenada. What I give? So we were just handed around, right? And it just so happened that English is the last colonizing power. And so we speak English. Even if growing up, my mom spoke French, because before the English were the French. My mom spoke French, and I was too Mr. Know-it-all to learn French, because no, I'm not going to learn that language. That's for you. I couldn't learn English. No, I regret it. But my mom probably has the most profound influence on my life. I grew up Catholic, and the Sunday Mass was non-negotiable. So we all had to go to the Sunday Mass, and we'll go to Mass and we'll come home. And the Sunday meal, there's no meal as important in Caribbean culture, in the Grenadian culture, as a Sunday meal. So we'll come home, and my mom and my sisters, I was the boy, so I got away from that, would take care of the Sunday meal. And then it was time for the meal. And because I was the youngest, I'm the youngest, my mom would call to me to say, come, before you can have your meal, make a plate and set that plate at the table in case a stranger comes by. And I would always ask the question, why? Why? One, why me? And two, why can't the stranger make their own meal in their own home? And my mom, in her patience, would look to me to say, because you'd always want to leave room for the stranger. And then one day, out of annoyance, I'm being so obnoxious about having to do this, my mom looked at me and said, listen, I want you to know, when you grow up and you're out there, don't ever call me to tell me what important table you're sitting at. You can only call me if you can then say to me, who else is at the table because of you?
Mm.
Don't bother to call me to say, oh, I'm at this important table. I don't want to hear it. You have to be able to say to me, and these people are at the table because of me. My mother's philosophy. And it started out with making a plate, setting a place at the table, not for the most important family member, for the stranger who might pass by. And Dr. Watson, as a young boy growing up, I would always pray that no stranger will pass by, so I have one more plate that's mine. But without fail, a stranger will pass by. And that lesson has taught me the importance of being inclusive, finding the persons who are left behind, finding the persons who are marginalized, finding the person who really may not belong at my family table, but they do belong at my family table. You don't belong? Of course you do belong. And my mom's philosophy of, yeah, don't simply invite them in. You make the plate. You set the place. So when they show up, the table is set, the plate is ready. You have a place at my table. And I don't use the story as to where it comes from, but I use that phrase very often at my university. That this is home, the table is set, your plate is ready, find your seat, your will be equitably served. It comes from my mom. I've given you the long version, but my university, time and time again, has heard the shortened version. The table is set, your place is at the table, find your place, your will be equitably served. I think that's the nucleus of leadership, bringing different voices to the table. My mom's philosophy.
Wow, that's so inspiring. And I'm glad you shared that answer with me because I came up with an acronym for the different things that I want to do when I spend time with God. And I ended up, first of all, with the word prefer. Then I turned it into preferred because I came up with more things. And then I turned it into preferred ways. But I remember as it was expanding, I needed a word for E in the acronym. And I decided to use the word entertain because I remember in the Bible, the word of the Lord says, be careful to entertain strangers. And so as you were sharing your experience, I was comforted and encouraged to say that's a really good thing to, because I have to budget my time to, for these things that I'm making time to spend, ways for spending time with God. So thank you for sharing. I just
There's a quote and it just popped into my head. And I don't want to take too much time and cause us to lose our place, but there's a quote that just popped into my head. I think it's credited to Maya Angelou. Maybe it's her, maybe somebody else. And it goes something like this. People will forget what you say. They'll even forget what you did to them, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And this whole idea of entertainment, entertaining, I think it's the Apostle Paul who said, be generous with your hospitality because some have entertained angels not knowing that they have, right? Entertaining, it's giving people access to your time, access to your home, access to your finances, access to your food, access to your family. There's nothing left. When we entertain, there's nothing left. All of us, we've poured ourselves to make the space, the meal, the occasion, the ambience, we poured ourselves into it. And what we're saying through entertainment is, really, I'm giving you access to me. And persons who have that kind of access leave knowing, yeah, she just gave me access to herself. There's nothing left. A beautiful, powerful testament.
Wow. Your mother was a profound thinker. Imagine she's talking to her son and saying to him, don't tell me about the great table that you're at. Tell me about who you brought to the table. We could spend the whole day on that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Did you envision, I know you spoke a little bit about this. You were not really thinking that you would become a provost, but you were called. What would you say to someone who is interested in such a path?
And there are multiple pathways to the provost. So 20 years ago, we would have said the faculty progression is the pathway to the provost. And that's true still maybe for 80% of the time, but it's now multiple pathways to the provost. And I would say, have a mentor, have good mentors, have persons that you can talk with about the challenges and the joys. I shouldn't make it sound as though it's only a challenge. It is a very joyous thing to be part of higher education administration. So talk to your mentors about what it means, the fulfillment that comes from being in higher ed administration. Talk with mentors about the kinds of things that you might be doing, and it might sound self-serving, it's not, the things you might be doing to be seen. We have to be seen. We have to be noticed. If no one notices your work, then your work didn't really happen. It's like we say for research, If you conducted research and it was never published, you didn't quite conduct research. Somebody has to know about it. Somebody has to see it, critique it, improve on it, add to it. So have a mentor and ask for ways in which you can be seen. And I don't want us to discount this idea of you want to be a provost, but now you're a dean. Don't start acting like a provost when you're a dean. The only job you have is the job of being a dean. Be a dean that is so compelling that someone will say, hey, I want him on my team. I want her on my team. I want her on my team. Be a dean that is so compelling that even if others might have limitations on who you are, but your work is so compelling that others take notice to say, yeah, have you seen this? I think sometimes we run the risk of performing the job that we don't have. We should be careful about that. Perform the job that you do have and perform it so well that your performance, your work speaks for you. So that even if when you're not in the room, your work is in the room. You may never had a chance to be in the president's office, but your work shows up in the president's office. And when you do that kind of compelling work, it takes your name in unimagined places. Don't try to perform the work of purpose while you're dean. People tend to look at it and say, he's trying to usurp. Just be the most exemplary dean there is. And that exemplary work takes your name at the table when you are not even there physically. So mentorship, you need mentorship. And the way I think of mentorship is to include around you persons who believe in you more than you believe in yourself. I can tell you, maybe I'll weave it in a little bit later on, but I am where I am today because when I felt like walking away, a person said, you don't know what you're capable of, do you? You don't know the skills you have, do you? You don't quite understand the path that is opening before you, do you? We see things in you that probably you can't see in yourself. And they're talking about giving up. We see this and how because every one of us will have moments when we are not up here, we weigh them there. And it's like, okay, it's the Elijah syndrome. Elijah said, take my life. I don't know what I'm doing. Just end it for me. And God showed up and said, and notice, God didn't show up in the fire or the thunder or the strong wind, the places that Elijah expected God to show up. God showed up in a whisper, said, Elijah. Mentors in your life are the whispers that would say, and they give you the energy to move on. Yeah, you must have people around you that believe in you more than you believe in yourself. Because 9 out of 10 times your belief in yourself will wane and they buoy you up.
Wow. You have given us such rich answers to these questions. I could almost end the interview, but I can't. I have to ask you a couple more questions. What do you tend to admire in a leader?
You know, I thank you for that. I think charisma sometimes is overrated. It's good, but it could be overrated. The leader who comes to my mind, higher education, I'll choose my friend and colleague, Andrea Luxton. And she would not want me to go there because she's also the kind of, don't praise me, keep my name out of it. But that's exactly why she's a great leader. Leaders who do not crave the accolades. Leaders who would want the accolades to be passed on to somebody else. There is a need for moral leadership. Courageous moral leadership. And it's scarce. There's a scarcity. There's a scarcity. And the reason why there is a scarcity, because moral leadership has a price. Has a price. I'll mention a few moral leaders of the 20th century and see what price they had to pay. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., see what price he had to pay. Mahatma Gandhi, see what price he had to pay. Nelson Mandela, see what price he had to pay. Desmond Tutu. These are persons who felt so called to the cause that the price became secondary. The cause was so important. That call to the cause was so important. They were fully aware of the cost, but the cost became secondary. Not because they themselves were the primary. No. They put themselves so far behind that they were willing to become the sacrifice for the cause. Courageous moral leadership looks to the cause that I'm a part of. I get up in chapel as often as I can, and I say to our students, I say to my students, I want you to find a cause that's bigger than you are and devote your life to that cause. You might have several causes, but find at least one and devote yourself to that cause. Because when you find a cause that is so important to you, there is no such thing as sacrifice because the cause is worth it. Sacrifice? That's not a sacrifice. The cause draws you to it. So Nelson Mandela got up in the trial and said, after he spoke for about 90 minutes, 2 hours, for this cause in South Africa, I am prepared to die. And the worst you can do to me is death, and I'm prepared to die. And he sat down. Why? Courageous moral leadership. And probably in higher education, there is no physical death, but the courageous moral leader would have to face social media tirade, reputational risks, misunderstanding of why that is so important. Why can't you just give in? Why can't you just compromise? Why can't you just give in? Courageous moral leadership. I'm drawn to such people. And I think we should have more of those persons in leadership positions, even within the higher education academy. Too many of us do not have that kind of moral stamina to do the right thing.
Amen. Amen. I love, love, love the idea of looking at it from the perspective of, is there a cause? Just this morning in my devotion that I was writing and preparing, I was thinking about that, because that is something I tell people from time to time. As you're thinking about the desires that God has placed in your heart to act on them, sometimes I use the story of David. Remember when David's father sent him to go see about his brother who
Yes.
were in the battle? And when he went down here and he saw Goliath, and David wasn't pleased, and his elder brother heard that David was thinking to go take on this giant, and the brother was saying, I know your pride. And David asked him this question, isn't there a cause? Isn't there a cause? And because David saw that cause, he was able to put himself in what some people would say is a life and death situation. We know the end of the story. But you are so correct. And I was thinking of other examples this morning as I was writing my devotional, but I love, just know that I really like that point. Thanks for sharing. Wow.
Thank you.
All right. So based on some of the things that you have been saying, you may have touched on the answer to this question somehow, but let me just still ask you, if you had to hire or promote a certain leader, what are some qualities that you would look for in that leader?
Yeah, thank you for that. Humility, compassion, kindness, grace. And notice I'm talking about the things that one might normally, without any in-depth analysis, one could easily call those too soft, right? Compassion, grace, kindness, being inclusive. I think a question that every leader should continually ask is, who else should be at this table? We should never be satisfied that the table is complete. We should never be satisfied that the table is complete. We should always ask, so who else should be around this table? Who else should be here? Because the moment we think the table is complete, the door is shut, nobody else comes in. But there should be an ongoing inquiry. Who else might be? Who else could share some light on this topic? Who else might we need to hear from? Being inclusive, right? But keep in mind that inclusivity is the byproduct of humility. If I think I've got it all, I don't need your voice. If I think it resides in me, I don't need anyone else. So when we're making a claim for inclusivity, we probably should stop to think that inclusivity is the byproduct of humility. The humble person would always ask, so what else? What else and who else? Humility. I want that kind of leader because that kind of leader makes room for others to join. The one that is self-sufficient, I've got it. I've got it. I don't need any voices. I don't need anybody else. I've got it. I know exactly what I need to do. I have the answer. I've got the answer. The humble leader would say, I do not. I need more voices. And if there's one phrase to take away, inclusivity is the byproduct of humility.
I wrote that down because wow, that is so deep. Thank you for sharing that. I almost want to ask you, what would you, pardon?
No, go ahead.
I want to ask you, what would you say, for example, if you were Noah or Elijah or one of those men, Moses, who you like, you know that God just told you to do it. You don't really need any confirmation, anything like that. What do you say to? Because I really resonate with what you said, and it's so deep. I had to write it down immediately. But I'm thinking of a person who feels that they have good reasons to not need, to include anyone in whatever else, or they think.
My example, and I could make the same point about Moses and Elijah and whoever else, David, Daniel, but I'll use Christ. God himself, Emmanuel, God himself came in human flesh to be with us.
Mm.
And he had all of the answers. He knew it. But look at his life. The Gospels use this phrase, a great while before day. That's very early, earlier than I would want to get up. A great while before day, he went alone by himself into the mountain or into this quiet place or into wherever it was. A great while before day, he consulted God, Christ, God, who had everything, consulted. Who else need to be at? He consulted, right? Gethsemane, Calvary. That prayer that we read too quickly, we read that prayer too quickly. I don't want this. Please take it away from me. But I'm going to consult with you. And if this is what you want, I'll do it. Ha! Think of humility. I know what I want, not this. Stop it, please, stop it. I make it pass away. But I'm going to stop long enough to consult with you. And if this is what you say, okay, I'll do it. Think of the leader who may have an opinion or a decision, and then her cabinet says, you know what we think? We think, I say, I made up my mind on this, right? I made up my mind on this. But I'm going to listen to you. Think of what that will do to you, Dr. Watson, as a young administrator, and you're talking to your supervisor. The supervisor says, I made up my mind, I know what I want to do. And then you say, but man, may I suggest, may I add to this for you? And you share. And that seasoned supervisor said, I was going to go this direction, but based on what you just said, all right, I changed my mind. I do it this way. Humility. Humility makes room. So Christ, God himself made room. God himself made room and said, I don't want this. But if that is what you want, I make room for it. And I could, we could look at the life of Elijah. We could look at the life of Daniel, the life of David. I think we need more reluctant leaders. Think about it. The great leaders didn't put a hand up and run to the front of the line. The great, memorable leaders were reluctant. and then felt the burden and said, I can't walk away from it. I can't walk away from it. I don't want this for myself. Reluctant leadership, not me first leadership, is what we need.
Well said. Thank you. And you know, the moment I asked the question and you started with Jesus, I said, who else could you? It was such a brilliant answer because Jesus knew all, but he still included. He still had 12 disciples.
And his 12 disciples. And he asked them questions.
Yes. And then the moment I said Moses, I thought, remember when Moses tried to do it by himself? What happened? Jethro had to have a conversation with him.
Yes.
But
yes.
Thank you so much for your answer. I know that this next question might not be very easy for you, but could you share with us your favorite Bible verse?
You know, it's one that might, it's one. So my favorite Bible verse, it changes based on the moment. So, you know, I have many in my toolkit. For this occasion, it might surprise you. 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1. And it goes something like this. Then David asked, out of the blue, there's no build up to it. Chapter 8 doesn't lead into chapter 9. There's no build up to it. Then David asked, is there anyone left in the household of Saul? And I could imagine, Dr. Watson, that his household became agitated. They were primed, they were ready, because they thought the king was going to do business now, liquidate the adversary, neutralize the threat to his throne. So anyone left in the household of Saul, let's go take care of them so the king's throne is secured forever. But that is not how the verse ended. Is there anyone left in the household of Saul to whom I could show kindness? And I could imagine his the king just lost his mind. Call the prophet, the king just lost his mind. The king needs to take care of business so that his throne is secured forever, so that none of the former king's descendants could threaten him on his throne, and the king wants to show kindness. Call the prophet, the king just lost his mind. But the last phrase is a kicker. Is there anyone left in the household of Saul for whom I should show kindness for Jonathan's sake? And I reflect on this verse, and I don't read the Bible like most people do. I try to read the Bible in a year and I can't, because that verse, I can't move on. I can't move on. So for 1 week, they say, come on, just go on to verse 2. No, I can't move on. I'm stuck in verse 1. But that's not the Bible plan. The plan says to read 5 chapters. No, I for the next month, I'm stuck in verse 1. To whom I should show kindness, because I know who Saul is. I know what Saul did, and kindness and Saul shouldn't come in the same sentence, but David brought them in the same sentence, but then gave some context for Jonathan's sake. And you know, the last time I talked about this with remember when I gave a devotion, I started off by saying, we choose our memory. Our memory is our choice. But you don't know what she did to me. You've chosen the memory. You don't know what I went through. You've just chosen the memory. David could have chosen to remember the household of Saul through Saul. He chose to remember the household of Saul through Jonathan. And it's not because I've arrived. I still struggle with the text. But it's a text that I keep before me as an aspiration. I show kindness because of a different memory. And so for those who are listening to this, the two of you who are listening to this, maybe, maybe it's a bad marriage, maybe it's a bad supervisor at work, maybe it's whatever it is. I said, but he doesn't quite get it. He doesn't understand. But that person at some point did something that was nice. Why not choose that as your point of reference? Maybe it's a bad supervisor, but maybe their wife, their spouse, maybe their spouse is so loving and the spouse is so kind to you. Why not use the spouse as a point of reference? Maybe it's the person you're dating and he just broke your heart. But his mom was so nice to you. Why not use the mom as a point of reference? We choose our memory. And I'll take it one step further. For those of us who are part of this Christian community, this place of faith, why not use Christ as a point of reference? And then the text would read, is there anyone left in the household of blank, your worst enemy? The person who hurt you the most, the person who lied and deceived you, the person who betrayed you. So anyone left in the household of blank, to whom I should show kindness for the cause of Christ. That's my text. I struggle with the text, but it's my aspirational text, because it's a text that I reflect upon so that I can choose my memory. I can choose my memory.
This interview could have been made up of, tell me some of your Bible verses and why. Amazing. Thanks for that answer. How about your favorite proverb?
Favorite proverb. So I'll use an African proverb. It's one I use on campus as well. If you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. And you could go back to the psalmist, or maybe it's Ecclesiastes. Two walking together, and one becomes encouragement. So if you want to walk fast, and I know how to walk fast, I could walk fast and I could get there. But if you want to walk far, walk together, because the encouragement of the one keeps the other going. And when you wane, I get encouraged. You wane, you get encouraged. And I think in this Christian journey, I think in this higher education journey, far is better than fast. If you want to walk fast, walk alone. There's no distraction. It's just you. You're just walking full speed ahead. There's no distraction. You think. If you want to walk far, walk together, because the one will support the other, and the journey becomes much further.
I like it. Thanks for sharing. I want to ask you this next question. It's one of my favorite questions. Someone listening to this conversation might have a decision to make.
Yes.
It's a decision that is not necessarily a black and white, wrong or right decision, but they are trying to make a decision. What word of wisdom would you give to this person or someone who is struggling to make a decision?
And I don't want to be flippant about it. So you would have done your due diligence, you would have thought about it, if you're a person of prayer, you would have prayed about it, you would have asked for divine wisdom, if that's your orientation. You'll have spoken with others, you've spoken with your mentor if that's your orientation. So I'm going to assume that you have surrounded yourself with collective voices, including your own spiritual discernment. And at the end of the day, trust yourself. Believe in yourself. Trust yourself. Believe that you have the capacity, you have the means, you have listened, you have reflected, you've asked for discernment. Believe that you receive discernment. Trust yourself. Make that decision. And some decisions will be wrong. That's the way it is. Because you make decisions based on what you know. I've made decisions based on what I know. And 5 minutes later, I had more information. I said, oh, if only I had that 5 minutes ago, I made a different decision. But you make it based on what you know. And you trust yourself. And the moments when those decisions could have been different or better, don't wallow too long. I have this little phrase that I say to myself: the most important decision you have to make is the next one, not the last one. So don't wallow too long in the last one, because that's not the most important one. It's gone. So it's what lessons have I learned from the last one? Prepare me for the next one. The most important decision is the next one, not the last one. Trust yourself in the moment. Believe in your capacity. Believe in your judgment. Believe in your judgment. Make that decision, and you mess up, acknowledge it. I'm sorry. Based on what I know, based on what I had, that was the best decision. Don't wallow too long, because the next one is the most important one.
Wow. I think that can be a breakthrough for someone who is listening, because at some point we have to make the decision. And some people might be uncomfortable with this, because you said earlier, you might make a decision without having all the information. Suppose somebody said, but why? I asked God for wisdom. Why didn't he give me the entire story? Why?
The path of the righteous. You can finish it better than I can.
Is as a shining light.
Shining light.
That grow more and more into the perfect day.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we would wish that God will simply give us the full gushing, but incremental is better. Incremental is better. You might, William Miller and his followers would have been spared so much heartache and ridicule had we understood the sanctuary message before the disappointment. So why didn't God spare them of all of that? Why didn't he reveal that before, so they'd be spared that great, chaotic, painful disappointment? It came afterwards.
And just to put some context, because somebody might be listening and they do not have any idea what you're talking about.
Right.
You're talking about the 1844 disappointment, when people thought God was coming, but he didn't.
That day. Right.
Okay. So just wanted to make sure.
Yes, the people thought Christ was going to come in that particular day and that particular time. And a clear understanding of it happened not before, but afterwards. So Why didn't they give them all of that so they make the right decision? I'll use a different example. The father of a son, so I understand the toddler years, and I'm not being cold-hearted here, but if we attempt to protect our children from every fall and every skinned knee, we're not helping them. We're not helping. We don't want our children to fall. We don't want any skinned knees. But if we are so protective as parents and say, he's never going to have a skinned knee, so I'm going to carry him every place he goes. I'm just going to carry him. Why? So he never have a skinned knee. I'm just going to carry him. He'll be my back every place he goes. Because I'm going to protect him from a skinned knee. If he walks, he might fall. Of course he might fall. So to protect that, I'm going to just carry him. We haven't helped our children. Nobody wants a skinned knee. But the skinned knee is part of right now.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And as you spoke about your son, I think about my son too, because I think he's in a certain grade. If he's in grade 3, I'm not giving him grade 6 work.
Right.
That would not be right. And sometimes we are not ready. Sometimes we're saying, God, show me the big picture. And if you should really reveal what he wanted us to do, we wouldn't want to do it because we are not even there, even spiritually. So thank you. This interview has really been a blessing. And I know that this next question is important for leaders that are watching. They have to make decisions. We are living in unusual times, and we have to make decisions in challenging times. Could you share with me a time when you were faced with a serious challenge and the need to make an important decision?
Yes. For the sake of time, I'll be less robust. I'll be briefer this time. So, I really like one. The speaker who came to chapel, and I thought the speaker crossed the line, went too far, said something that shouldn't have been said in chapel. And so the following week, because I owned it, I claimed it, it's mine. We invited the speaker, I went to chapel and said, sorry for what happened last week. I apologize for things that were said last week. Half the student body felt appreciated, thank you. The other half felt they just disrespected us because this was our speaker, this was our person. The things he said, yeah, we resonated with. And there was a social media uproar, a social media furor, if you will, and it was just taking a life of its own. Everything was out there. There was a video that was made, and it really was having traction, looking as though the university was not being very sensitive to the needs of African American, Black, marginalized people, that if a certain segment complained, we cave and say sorry, but we have been suffering for so long and you never said sorry to us, and so it just took off. It was a difficult moment, and we were hearing from certain voices, certain corners of the community that they have gone too far. We should simply expel them. We should, just this is taking a life of its own. If we don't expel them, we're going to encourage others to do the same thing. Let's be hard. Let's take a hard line on this and put a stop to all of this nonsense. We did differently. We did differently. And Andrea Luxton and I, we organized over it. And one of the reasons I appreciate her as a leader, she used the story of the paralytic who came to the roof to Christ, by his friends that lowered him down to the roof to see Christ. Nobody asked how the house owner felt. His roof was torn up. We are celebrating the healing. We didn't ask about the method. We just went straight to the outcome. The outcome, he was healed. The method, what kind of method is that? What kind of method is that? You're going to tear up my roof. And she made the point that in this situation, probably we're too fixated on the method. And let's think about the outcome of our students who for decades were marginalized. And we may not like the method, but can we find an outcome of healing? You know, it's fascinating, Dr. Watson, that when it's a cause that we believe in, we ignore the method. We just go on, the guy was healed, for crying out loud, the guy was healed. We ignore the method. When it's a cause that we don't believe in, we ignore the outcome. I said, what kind of method is that? They went to social media. What kind of method is that? The friends of the paralytic tore up the man's house. I've never heard a sermon on the householder. I've heard something about the friends, how good friends they were. Not about the paralytic, how much faith he had. Not about Christ, his compassion. I've never heard a sermon about the householder. Nobody cares about the householder. The method, probably, yeah, he wouldn't have been a fan of the method. But there's an outcome that we can celebrate. We're probably not a fan of this method, but there's an outcome that we can celebrate. Make our students feel that Andrews is home. And that's the outcome. And that's the way we approach it. And I think we have to pay attention to the outcome that we want. The method might cause us all kinds of, I'm not saying to ignore the method, but we should not allow the method to cloud the outcome.
Well said. Can't even add or take away from that. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, go ahead. Pardon?
I'll say my pleasure.
Yeah.
I'm honored to be with you.
Yes. You have shared some such practical words of wisdom today. And just in closing, I just want to ask you if you have I already feel challenged, but I just want to just wrap up this interview. If you could just share in the last minute or so a call to action, a word of wisdom or encouragement for our viewers today.
This is the word of encouragement. I'm not sure how wise it is, but it's a word of encouragement. Your work has more impact than you realize. Your work has more impact than you realize. Once in a while, I meet my former high school students. That's 30 years ago, my former high school students. And they'll remind me of things that happened. I have no idea. And I just have to smile and nod as though I know what they're talking about. I have no idea what they're talking about. And they'll say, and that changed my life. And I can't burst their bubble by saying, and what was that? I have to go along with it, right? I have to go along with it. Something that I did not remember, something that never registered in my mind, because I didn't think it was that important. It didn't stay with me. And that was impactful. We had our graduation in May, and I was doing graduation rehearsal, and a young lady rushed across the crowd. I didn't have any inhibitions. That's my teacher. That's my teacher from high school. 30 plus years ago. That's my teacher. That's my teacher. She came for her sister's graduation, rushed up, gave me a bear hug, and told me stories that changed her life. I couldn't remember them. Couldn't remember them. She went back. They have a WhatsApp group. They're all graduates from the high school I taught at. They had a WhatsApp group. And then she said, I'm going to add you to the WhatsApp group. And everyone in the WhatsApp group has some story about something that happened. I can't remember. I have no idea what they're talking about. But life-changing, impactful. I could add my students from Tennessee State. They called me. One of my students from Tennessee State called me in 2018. They said, I'm applying to be a superintendent. I want you to be my reference. I said, you know, it's been 18 years, right? You know, I don't have any. I know, but you've been the most impactful. What did I do? I have no idea. Here's the kernel. Here's the takeaway. Forget everything else I said. Here's the kernel. Your work has more impact than you realize. You know, we wonder, am I making a difference? I don't see any results. Wait 20 years, they'll call you. You're in class and it's like they twiddling their thumbs. They're not listening, not paying attention. Yes, they are. Wait 20 years, they'll call you. You will forget. They won't. Our work has more impact than you realize. We change lives when we don't know. The things that we do that we want to stand out probably will never stand out. The things that we do that we just, okay, there it is. For us, there's no significance. They know the place it came from. And it is.
Wow. Well said. What a great way to end this rich, meaningful, relevant conversation. Dr. Christon Arthur, thank you very much for taking the time to share such practical words of wisdom today. I certainly learned a lot, and I know that our viewers did too. And viewers, I want to thank you for watching. I encourage you to share this video with others, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of this Wise Leader Virtual Summit.
My pleasure. Happy to be with you.
You're welcome.